Okay, so pardon me, I'll just be changing slides in front of me here, but I'd like to introduce to everybody today the Commons Stack. And we are building tools to scale the commons to reprioritize people and the planet. So why are the commons important? I'm sure a lot of people here understand this concept, but ultimately there are a lot of wicked problems that can only be solved together. We have climate change, resource depletion, global social unrest. These are really big problems and we need to find solutions for them, and we really need to come together around them. But what's wrong with our current approach? I'm just going to go quickly through these because I think everyone understands the problem, but essentially we have one-dimensional economies that optimize away people and the environment. We have outdated governance systems that are reactive rather than proactive, and they're very tall hierarchies that are not effective at disseminating information. And we have a lack of global coordination around these shared problems. Essentially, nations can't decide on these things. It's a global tragedy of the commons writ large. But there are solutions. Commons, cooperative structures, platform cooperatives, all of these basically alternative economic models have value-aligned economies that optimize for their people and their local environments. They have local governance, they have communities making decisions, which is great. But the problem is, and we talked about this yesterday at the DGOV node, these small communities have a hard time scaling. So how can we scale this kind of coordination? Well, good thing, blockchain is a trust network. So we have new opportunities for global trust networks. And actually, if we do it right, we can align our economic incentives with community values. And that's what the Commons Stack is all about. So the Commons Stack is essentially a library of open source blockchain components that enable purpose-driven communities to raise and allocate funding, make decisions, and measure impact. So it's basically a DAO in a box. We have a tech stack for the commons. This is a future vision of Commons Stack components. You can see we have governance tools, funding tools, proposal tools, analytics tools, and also initialization tools. You've probably heard us speaking about a few of these components before, but we'd like to draw this future vision that this could include quadratic voting from the radical exchange groups. This could include Harburger taxes. This could include other networks that are already out there like Gitcoin or the Bounties network, analytics tools like SourceCred, which we've talked about a few times. And all of this comes together in the modeling framework of CAD, which Michael Zargham just demonstrated earlier. So this is a future vision of of the components that could be involved in the Commons Stack. And let's zoom into where we're at today. So we are basically building towards a minimum viable commons. We've identified these 4 key components: sustainable funding, proposal and escrow service, continuous decision making, and measuring impact. And these are the 4 components that we will be building in an iterative launch strategy and then synthesizing them all together into this minimum viable commons. And we would love to enable any group to take this minimum viable commons and launch it for your community. So essentially, we are working from a token engineering foundation. All of this comes from CAD as a modeling layer. We are modeling our system, we are designing and implementing our components here. Then these components are basically, you can take off the shelf, you can customize them to your specific community need, and you can deploy them in your community initiative. And of course, anything we learn there, because all of these will be beta tests as we iterate through these designs, we will collect the data and we'll improve the model, and we'll basically iterate on this over and over until we have systems that work. So this is turning this into token engineering now. And also, one of the most important points with the Commons Stack, we believe that token engineering is the future. We are raising money, and 20% of our first round fundraise is going to open source CAD as an industry critical tool. So, complex system design is complex. You start from mathematical first principles. This is where Zargham really thrives. He creates all this complicated math that goes way over most of our heads. Then we model that mathematics into token circuit diagrams, which we can plug into CAD, and we can simulate and test our systems for failure modes before we write the first line of code. So this is revolutionizing crypto network design. And the great thing about the Commons Stack is we're not asking everybody to start from mathematical first principles and come up with your own token circuit diagrams. All of this complex system design is baked into the Commons Stack components. When you take them off the shelf, you customize them to your needs. All of this token engineering process is in your design, which is basically infrastructure is useful when it's invisible. So now we've talked about the overall common stack system, and for the rest of the presentation, we're just going to zoom into the first component, the augmented bonding curve. Everyone has heard about bonding curves and how they can provide continuous funding for communities. So we'll just spend the rest of our time talking about that. So the augmented bonding curve is slightly different from most bonding curves because obviously bonding curves have some issues. They're Ponzi schemes, they have run on the bank issues. Well, how do we address those issues? We use mechanism design. So one of the important things about the augmented bonding curve is it has two phases. So there's a hatch phase, which initializes the curve, and then there's the open phase when it's live to the public. And I'll just go into each of those phases briefly here. So the hatch phase is basically a community crowd fund to pool funds for the initialization of the funding and the collateral pools. So I'll have a diagram in the next slide which can show, but essentially all community funding goes and is split into two different pools. And the fact that we're splitting money into these two different pools gives the system some stability, which we'll also examine in the next slide. One important thing to note is that the people that are involved in the hatch will have a large say over the governance of this community in the beginning. So we need to make sure that these people are trusted members of the community. And actually, this is the trusted seed that starts this community. When we start decentralized systems, they're very prone to exploit in the beginning. So we need to make sure that we have this core community of people who are dedicated to guiding this community to the right place and giving it time to establish itself within these decentralized paradigms. So in the hatch phase, the community trusted seed comes together, they donate some funds, and those funds are split according to the community preference between a funding pool and a collateral pool. The funding pool funds work done in the community, the collateral pool is the money that sits behind the bonding curve if people want to sell their tokens back and reclaim their collateral. So when they send those funds to the bonding curve, they receive some bonding curve token, whatever it is, at the hatch price. So this price is basically an initialization price. This might be 10 cents, for example. Call it 10 cents a coin. And then what happens, once the hatch is complete, the funding pool and the collateral pool have been initialized. Now the curve is live. So you can see the curve here. The public can buy and sell from the curve. And the price of that token is now the post-hatch price. So say that's 30 cents. So we started at 10 cents, it's now 30 cents, and the curve is live to the public. So obviously all of these hatchers, they just bought these tokens at 10 cents and now they're worth 30 cents. Why don't they just go and sell all their tokens and make a bunch of money? Well, because we trust them. A, they're the trusted seed, and also because there's a vesting curve. So they're not actually able to sell those tokens immediately. They're unlocked according to a drip rate, this half-life decay curve, or basically drips tokens into their account that they can sell if they want to. We want to make sure that these economic systems are regenerative and stable. We don't want people to just sell all their tokens right away. And we're not trying to create a get-rich-quick scheme. We're trying to create sustainable, regenerative, circular economies that produce public goods. Okay, so the open phase. If anybody was here that just heard Michael Zargham speak, he was talking about two different pressures on the bonding curve. So we can see that when the price of this token goes up, there is sell pressure of people who want to claim collateral. That's cool. But when enough people sell, you actually have buy pressure because people are interested in governance over the funding pool. As more people sell, more funds are moved into the funding pool by this exit tribute mechanism. So whenever people leave the economy, some portion of their profits goes into the funding pool because this is a community endeavor. We're trying to raise funds for the community. So as more people sell and claim profits, there will be other people coming in and saying, hey, look, the token supply is decreasing, therefore I have more governance over the funding pool, and therefore there's this opposing buy pressure. So there's some interplay between these two forces, which basically creates volatility in the market in some acceptable range, and that volatility is turned into continuous funding through this exit tribute. So this turns this into basically a money-generating machine, not a magic money-generating machine, but it does provide some continuous generation of funds for your community purposes. So just to recap, the whole augmented bonding curve system, we have the collateral pool and the funding pool. We have capital coming into this economy. We have these funds being used to fund proposals and complete work in this community, which produces value. Now, granted, this isn't necessarily a given that value is produced. You may have a community that does not produce value, in which case there will probably be less people putting capital into this community. But if your community, such as DGOV, is producing really great products and great work, then chances are people will see the value produced by your economy and want to participate in funding that and also potentially sharing in the rewards of that community. And of course, you also have exiting capital, which continues to fund this funding pool, so you kind of have this circular, regenerative community economy. And we can show you how this works if this runs. Actually, we just ran this a second ago, so no, I don't think that's going to work. But anyway, we showed you this simulator a moment ago. You can play with the initial parameters of the bonding curve, and when you run this simulation, you can see how your community token price may fluctuate, and you can see the amount of funds that is accumulating in your community to be spent on community work. So where can we use this? Basically, any community can use an augmented bonding curve and the rest of the common stack components to create sustainable funding for your group. So we have Moloch DAO, who is working on Ethereum 2.0 infrastructure. We have Metacartel, who's working on UX. We have lots of other DAO communities around art, around organizational DGOV, all that kind of stuff. This is awesome, but everybody needs a sustainable funding mechanism. So with the Common Stack Augmented Bonding Curve as an open source component, you can take this off the shelf, you can customize it to your community needs, and you can launch it as essentially a financial asset for an open organization or a community. And we have further upgrades to come. There are still some issues with ecosystem funding DAOs around the accountability of funds. At this point in time, someone comes up with an idea, they get money, maybe they go and complete that idea, maybe they just run off with the money, we don't know. We need a proposal and escrow system. On-chain voting issues, obviously we have all sorts of issues with voting on-chain in every ecosystem that's working today. And we have a lack of measurement of impact. So what is this? This is basically the Common Stack roadmap. We're building each of these components to deal with issue by issue, and we think that everyone in the space could use this minimum viable commons to make your DAOs a success. So token engineering R&D is a commons too. A lot of token engineers today are working on R&D in their spare time. So we have a community invitation to everybody here and much wider as well. And we would like to launch the Token Engineering Commons, which will take these components that are being produced by the Common Stack and essentially creating a sustainable funding mechanism to fund the open R&D of all of these important primitives so we can build these components for everybody in the community to use. And I think I am running low on time, but I just wanted to say the Common Stack is fundraising for basically building these components, component by component, and then synthesizing them into a minimum viable commons. When we raise this money, we will get started on the augmented bonding curve right away. We believe that these components are so necessary for everybody in the ecosystem. And when you contribute to the Common Stack, it is not a token sale, but you will be part of the Common Stack Trusted Seed, which is what we talked about earlier. This is the trusted community that will basically launch all of the augmented bonding curves that come from the Common Stack components. So if you are part of the Common Stack Trusted Seed, you have contributed to building these open source components, and you will have Common Stack tokens, which give you access to hatch all future commons that come from the augmented bonding curve component. And we think this is a really good value proposition to the community to be able to basically jumpstart this new community economic model and build a better future for all of us. And we have a wonderful team behind all this and wonderful advisors. And if you'd like to talk more, we would love to chat with you about it. And if you would like to be a Common Stack member, please go to commonstack.org/apply. Thanks very much, everybody.